now. Here we go. So we're here for the Q&A after watching the documentary, The Boy Who Found Gold. And Father Bill, you and I have, we had a lovely phone conversation over the summer and have had some email exchanges since then. And I feel like I should show you my face so that we can meet properly.
Oh yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you in real time with screens. And maybe someday I could make a pilgrimage to meet you in person. But thank you for taking the time and joining us on Zoom. We have some folks here and on Zoom as well. So I'll kind of open the floor if there's questions, and I'll try and monitor the chat as well.
This is part of a class, right?
Well,
Or
yes and no. I mean, I'm teaching a class on art, religion, and contemporary culture this fall.
okay.
But my colleague Justin Saviatanis and I are both familiar with your work in particular. We've used those some of your images in our other courses as well. Yeah,
Okay.
so we have seminary students, alums, community friends here in person and joining us virtually, just like you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So maybe we'll start with those also on Zoom. Does anyone have any questions or comments that they'd like to share? Don't be shy. Or in person. I don't need to. Yeah, no, you wanna? Yeah, why don't you come up here because it's only the mic is the best place to hear. Yeah.
Where am I? Hello, 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 Father.
Hi.
Thank you. This was an amazing journey. The film was really an amazing introduction. And I'm less familiar with the tradition of icons. I work as a Hebrew scribe and calligrapher. And something you said in the film reminded me of something in my own work that I wanted to ask you about, which is you were speaking about I think it was the icon of Nestor. And you said something like, I had a photograph of the icon, but once the icon was gone, it was just a photograph. The presence wasn't there anymore. And I thought about in the Jewish tradition, we have the Torah scroll, and we have you could have a book of the Hebrew Bible, the Torah. And the difference is, as one of my colleagues said to me, the book of the Torah is the text of the Torah, but the scroll is the Torah. That's the difference. So I'm wondering for you, at what point does the icon become the icon, right? Presumably it begins, its materials, it's wood or canvas or panel and paint and paintbrush, and at some point it becomes this sacred object, it becomes this new thing, the icon. Is that like from the moment of conception, at some point in the painting, when you first see the image in your head, like at what point does it take on the uniqueness of the icon? That's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think sometimes, I mean, I remember I've been doing this since 1990, so that's 31 years. But I remember sometimes, even before I would put in the face, that it would already be there. You know, I would feel that the person was there. And sometimes it doesn't feel like they're never there, you know, to me. So some of them that I have had and have commissioned. So I don't choose who I want to do, but every once in a while I'll stop and do somebody that I really, really love, like Rachel Carson. I wanted to do her. Elijah McLean, that boy that was killed in Colorado, Matthew Shepard, every once in a while, although that was a commission. But yeah, I think that's about all I can say. They sometimes you're really working in the zone, you know, you can feel, and you're able to you're able to create an atmosphere. And sometimes I feel like I'm working in a blizzard, and that's what I'll tell people. I'm working in the middle of a snowstorm, like there's a story called Silent Snow, Secret Snow that I loved when I was in college. And it's this boy imagining that his room is covered with a blizzard. So sometimes the yama yama, the Buddha, is called the voice that's talking to you all the time while you're working. Sometimes that's too loud and I just have to work through it anyway. So right now I'm doing St. Albert the Great, who was Thomas Aquinas' teacher. And I've always liked him. So it's a joyful icon to do for me.
Thank you.
Anybody else? For those on Zoom, you'll have to just jump in or type something because I can't necessarily see you.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, in the film you talked about the person coming to the icon would kind of bring maybe whatever emotion is in them. And you mentioned that in the one you might see like a sad face and a sad expression, or a really loving and happy expression, either coming from Mary or maybe from Jesus. So I was curious, what's the hardest part, or it could be what's the easiest part in trying to capture that very specific emotion, but also something that's still elusive in the painting that can go either way. Like for you, your process of how you figure out for the icon what emotion you're portraying.
Mm-hmm. I think I haven't seen the movie for a long time, so I'm trying to remember. I think I was referring to sometimes doing a martyr. I like Jerzy Papaluszko, the Polish Solidarity chaplain, who was kidnapped October 19th, 1984, I think, and carried in a trunk, and then beaten to death with baseball bats and thrown into a reservoir. So, and they found him, I think, 4 or 5 days later. So when I was contemplating him doing his icon, I had read a book by, I forget the guy's name, but he was a Time magazine correspondent writer. And I was just thinking about, the day he was kidnapped and his whole life. So it got very serious. It was the same way doing Nestor, who died in 1993. Icons are solemn. So many times people will say, how come icons are so sad? How come Mary looks so sad? Or how come? And I read an article when I was just beginning about the Russians' idea of happiness and the American idea of happiness. So it's a little bit different, but icons, they have a solemn feeling to them. The reason I think they work is that they're not really a portrait. So if you're looking at an icon of Mary, Mary never wore a Byzantine shower cap and, a Maphorion and red shoes and all that. And that when you see a picture of her, that she was a Jewish woman and that she didn't look anything like that. But it's sort of like a cartoon that you can put your own Mary into it, because that that's not really Mary. So did I answer the question yet?
Yeah, no, that was good. I was just kind of curious about that process, just because the icons are lovely. So, and just all of the emotion
Sometimes
captured.
sometimes you try to feel the person. And I know that a lot of people do that with a deceased relative. You know, they'll say, I just felt my mom was near me today, or I felt either I was thinking of my dad or he was thinking of me or something. And then when you are thinking about them, you sense their presence, or you know what that presence was like. You know what your mother was like, or you know what your dad was like. And when I worked in the AIDS hospice, there were so many people that died. And I remember them. And every once in a while, like today happens to be one of my best friends who died of AIDS, his birthday. So when I think of him, I kind of sense who he was, his presence, how much I miss him. And that is what you're trying to find when you do an icon of somebody. If it's Albert the Great and they lived in the 1100s, you know, I just have to get a sense of Albert was like Hildegard of Bingen. He loved everything. He was interested in everything. So a person like that is fascinating to me too. So I'm having a lot of fun doing Albert because I think he was a very wide person, especially for his own time.
Thank you.
I have a question. Especially at the end of the movie, they had all the pictures of going into the church spaces and the icons were placed. When you're creating the icons, how aware of you, or how much do you know of where they're going to actually be placed? Or do they design the place around the icon, or the vice versa?
No, you know, I hardly ever see them once they're gone. I just finished Father Arupe, who was the general of the Jesuits for many years. And he had been the novice master in Tokyo, and then the provincial of Japan. And he happened to go there in 1938. So he was there when the bomb was dropped. And I did him Japanese style because I felt so much of his life had been devoted to Japan and he loved Japan. And so it went to Xavier High School in New York City. And they sent me a picture of the hallway and where it was going to go. And then I asked them, you know, how big did they want it? And they said, so I ended up doing it 24 by 24. And, you know, hoping they'd like it. Sometimes you never hear anything. I mean, you send it, but you never hear anything back. So many of them I have never seen in their place, but they usually tell me where it's going to go and kind of how big they want it.
Yeah, next coming up.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm a playwright, and a lot of the work I do, I'm also a gay person, and do a lot of work around community, and have been drawn to icons and think of my work in playwriting and poetry, not the same, but in relation to the idea of icons. I'm from the Jewish background and have a different relationship in that respect as well. But one of the things that you talked about in the movie is folks coming from, gay folks coming from small towns and then coming to create chosen family. And one of the things that I see in my work with icons and figures who have been seen as saints and martyrs is that as a kind of chosen family across time. And I'm curious if there are ways that you see Jesuits across time. That was something that came up. If you see these figures across time and place as a kind of chosen family. And I don't even know where that fits in. Are we chosen by those people? Do we choose them? I don't think it's clear. So I'm curious how chosen family in some ways might
Oh,
relate to iconography and icons.
yeah, I want to mention a Jewish scholar that I'm just reading, Melissa Raphael. Do you know of her?
I don't know.
She wrote The Face of God in Auschwitz. And it's such an amazing book. I can only get through like a chapter and then I have to stop because it's so profound after reading Viktor Frankl, you know, and that is a male view of the lack of the presence of God in the camps. And she's giving a whole different view. And right away, I went to her chapter on the Shekinah, or God as mother, you know, and how the women that she interviewed talked about God there. So that's and she said that they, not knowing each other, you know, they would stand together and hold hands through the most horrific periods during that time. And there's one scene where this woman was really hungry and a cart goes by and another woman reaches out and hands her a crust of bread. And she calls out, your name, and the cart goes off. So she doesn't even know the name. And this is all about the feminine presence of God in these women. And I think what you're referring to, as I said, when gay people would come to Manhattan from all over the nation because their town was too little and would not support any kind of difference of any kind, and they'd get to New York and they'd make their own kind of family. But so I think I should stop there. See if that's what you wanted to know.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering if you see some similarities between a community of icons and a chosen family.
A community of icons. I don't know what do you mean by
rather the figures that you're drawn to, if you
Mhm.
think sort of family-like at all, or even if there's any sort of comparison.
I like everybody have my favorite, my saints that feel more real to me than others. You know, there's some people that probably I could try to get to know forever and I never would. You know, they just I don't connect. And I'm not exactly sure why some of them you really do, but well, Hildegard, for example, her music, you know, she wrote 77 songs in the first opera ever. This was 500 years before Bach. So her music kind of mediates her presence to you because it's so exotic and it's so feminine. You know, it's chant, but it goes way up into the rafters. It's just wild. And you can see how much fun the nuns must have had singing that. And when I sit there listening to her, in fact, when they wanted to punish her toward the end of her life because she buried a man, she buried a man who had committed suicide, and it must have been a slow death because she said to the bishop, she said, no, he went to confession before he died. And he goes, dig him up. She goes, no, I'm not going to dig him up. And he goes, dig him up. And she went outside and took all the crosses and everything off his grave so that nobody would find him. So they put her under interdict for a year, which means she couldn't have mass or couldn't sing. And this was when she was 80 years old. So it practically killed her. Finally, they felt they'd punished her enough. They were really punishing her because she was powerful. And finally, they let her have the singing and the mass back, and she died shortly after that. So there's that. I think you probably, just as I'm telling you this, you can relate to that. You know, you can relate to an understanding of being an outsider in society. And yet, I don't think anything's more powerful than being an outsider.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hi, Father. You mentioned in the film a little bit, and then in answers about the spiritual experience you have while painting icons. Do you want to share a moment that's a little bit more that wasn't talked about in the film that was very intimate and holy, and something that stuck out to you recently?
Where are you? I'm trying to
Me?
find you. Are you behind Jennifer?
No, I'm on the Zoom, but you probably can't see
Oh,
me if you're
okay.
on your phone. So that's.
Let me see if I can find you. How do I find you? How do I, Jennifer, how do I find you? Do I push something?
Yeah, when you're on your phone, I'm trying to think, there's maybe a button.
There's what?
There's like, you can swipe maybe and see different people.
Okay. My friend Kenny's coming in. He's 33, so he knows everything. Oh yeah, is that you? So that's Theo, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right. And you wanted to know a recent experience of?
A recent experience of feeling that spirituality that was particularly intimate and or holy. I'm very fascinated with the whole mystical side of your work, given that I've talked to other iconographers and none of them have really mentioned that. So I'm intrigued.
Yeah, it's, let me think. I think I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned it in the film, but without my mother, I never would be able to do Mary the way I do, because Mom was a I don't know how you say it, you know, she was she loved being a mother, you know what I mean? She and she was very tender and used old-fashioned words like darling, you know, good night, my darling, she'd say, you know, that's very old-fashioned. But that kind of, and she was also pretty much a mama bear, you know, pretty fierce about her kids and defending them and protecting them. And, you know, my sisters always said she knew which guys that they really liked and which guys that they didn't. So she, you know, she knew things that a mother does. But there's a picture, I think, in the movie of my mom with my niece, Carrie. And she's looking at you. And Mom is looking at you, holding my niece. But she's looking at you, not sadly, but kind of fearfully, looking at you. Kind of saying, don't hurt my baby, don't hurt Carrie, you know, don't let anything happen to her. And that's kind of the look that Mary gives when she's holding the baby. She's protective of the baby, but in the icons where he's touching her face or something, he's actually trying to comfort her. So when I like doing the icons of Mary probably most of all. And I don't get, I work on commission because I have to. That's how I make my living. So if I'm doing Mary, I think of that incredible love and the tender love she had. But I also think that her relationship before she had the baby was with God. And that relationship with what we call God the Father in Catholicism, or God the Creator, that relationship sustained her through the Passion and the Crucifixion, even, you know, when she saw what was being done to her son. So if I can touch into that at all. And I used to get really like moved when I would be doing the baby's feet or his hands or anything. It was, I pretended in my mind that I was touching him, touching his hand or something. And you try to feel what Mary felt for the baby, or you try to feel like in the case of Nestor, the martyr, you try to feel like they are. In some ways, I compared it, although I don't think this is good icon talk, but when an actor has to take another role, when Meryl Streep becomes Margaret Thatcher, or when she becomes what's her name in The Devil Wears Prada, she's becoming another person, but she's still herself. And I'll try to get that far into the people that I paint. I don't always make it though. And I think only the people that look at them can tell whether they're successful or not. If you feel something, then I know I've been successful. Or if you love praying with the icon of Mary, or you love praying with the icon of, or an image, not an icon, but of Rachel Carson, who is one of my favorite people. If you feel her when you see the image I did of her, then that's a success.
Thank you.
Did I hit it yet?
Yeah, thank you. And I love the way you talk about Our Lady too. So thank you.
You're welcome.
That was really, really beautiful what you just said. And I just wanted to say that when I noticed in the film, when you were talking about the creation process of it, that when I was watching you, your face changed, and it's almost like it was just coming out of your eyes. Like it was almost like tears were coming out, like your heart was just almost exploding out. It was beautiful. And I was really excited to hear about what you just said about that process. Do you feel like, you talked a lot about the eyes, and to the window to the soul, and then that connection down into the heart and the center chair in the center. And then when you were just talking about like the connection that you feel into, like you relate to that, is that like a process where you're able to root into your heart and like feel into your soul? Is that a process where you're connecting into that deeper level instead of it being an intellectual process?
Yeah, boy, it's funny, I was a Jesuit for 35 years, and one night, one of the superiors said to me, "Well, what's been going on, Billy? You're not very talkative." And I said, "Well, I speak fluent Jesuit, but it's not my native language." And everybody in the room just went, "Whoa," they thought I was being sarcastic. But in order to talk Jesuit, I have to go up to my head, I really do. I mean, and it's not something that I do naturally, I guess I'd probably be more of a heart person, but I love reading theology, for instance, and sometimes the most dry theology is the most exciting for me, because it's sort of like, you put things into it. But I think it I could say more, but I'm not sure it's the right thing to do. But there have been what is said about icons is you look at them, but they look at you too. And that's why most iconographers don't sign it. So you're not getting, if you get an icon or a print even of mine, you're not getting a McNichols, you're getting Christ of the Sandias, or you're not getting, it's not like having a Van Gogh where you definitely want a Van Gogh. So, and you hope and pray when you're doing them. I hope my experience of doing St. Joseph we're in the year of Joseph, by the way. Pope Francis had made this whole year from December 8th last year till December 8th this year, the year of Joseph. So I'm trying to spend the year with him. And so when I've done maybe 5 icons of Joseph. So if you get one, I'm hoping you feel what I felt about him. And you get some sense of who he was, you know?
Yeah, thank you. I saw your interview with Mirabai over Joseph and back at the Mystic Summit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay.
I never know if I answered the question right because they're so it is a feeling like we're in the season of the souls right now, you know, from about October 15th to November 15th. It's like in Celtic cultures, Mexican cultures, everything, the souls are supposed to come closest to the earth at this time of year. So I'm playing Beethoven Moonlight Sonata all the time, you know, because that seems like the theme song for the season of the souls for me. So I do use things to set the mood for me. I used to paint a lot to Hildegard. And I would just sometimes burst out laughing because I said, those nuns are having so much fun. You know, you can tell the way they're singing it's so glorious and it's so, you know, it scoops around and very joyful. So the season of the souls is always comes and then it leaves for a few days and then we go into Advent, you know. So this time of year is sort of like my favorite time of year from now until I'm not too much on the heat of summer anymore, you know, 'cause summer's really, really hot, but so I don't like to paint in July because it's usually too hot for the entire month, but I always end up having a commission where I have to. So.
Krista, did you have a follow-up question?
I was just going to say that I was, when you were talking about your experience in the hospice, I was, so I'm double dipping here, but that I had the opportunity to photograph people that were dying for a book. And I photographed a fella, Jeremy, who had AIDS. And my picture that I have of him had a mark on his side. And he was looking into the darkness and holding a teddy from his lover. And when you were talking about that experience of being with that person, and I just wanted to share with you that hit me in the feels. So thank you for being so vulnerable and being able to spend time with us and be open about this experience. I'm really grateful for this time with you. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a woman who did the first exhibit on people with AIDS in New York, and her name is Rosalind Solomon. And she did a whole catalog. And if you look her up, you know, you can see a lot. She was very much criticized at first for doing it, for even though every single person gave her permission to photograph them. But you know how that is. But so thank you too. I see Catherine there. Do you have any questions, Catherine? I see you. I like your
questions. I'm just emotional. I also have like a light comment.
Great.
I have a light comment, not a question. I just appreciated all your theater references. Like you started off strong with St. Joan in the documentary, you quoted Bernard Shaw, and then mentioned The Normal Heart.
Oh,
and then you mentioned West Side Story, and I'm just like, I love St. Joan. So I'm just saying, I appreciate that. As a fellow gay Catholic theater a guest theater person. Yes, loved it.
Mhm. Ooh, yeah. Joan is a really, really strong person throughout my life. I mean, when I think of her, I shiver. You know, I really do. Have you read The Retrial of Joan of Arc by Regine Pernod?
No, but the only St. Joan plays I really know well are Bernard Shaw, and then there's Brecht's St. Joan of the Stockyards, which ends up being like very atheist. But yeah,
Mhm.
I will look. I know this playwright because he also did an Antigone that I've seen, but I'll look it up.
Ennui did the Lark too about Joan, and then Leonard Cohen wrote the most beautiful song, Joan of Arc. That I think my favorite version is Judy Collins doing it live, but it's a very haunting song because it's about the fire following her. And yeah, no, the reference I was making, it was to a book of the trial of rehabilitation that her mother had done 25 years after she died. And in the book, in that trial, the kids she grew up with are now 40 or 45 years old. And they're all talking about Joan. And they're all making jokes, you know, saying how funny she was and how when the bells would ring, she would kneel down and they'd all make fun of her and she would do it anyway. And so she really becomes like a real person to you. And Regine Pernod is a scholar and kind of a Joan person too, you know. Joan has her fans like, you know, modern day singers do.
Yeah.
Joan and certain Catholic saints really have a fan club.
Yeah, I'm familiar. There's so many. When I was a theater major, and so like I was struggling to find like very queer monologues, and there's like 1,000 like 70s, 80s lesbian playwrights who wrote Joan of Arc plays. I'm like, of course you did.
Are there really?
Yeah.
And
But
yeah, there's some very weird movies about her too. I mean, she just never goes away, ever. You know, people are still thinking about her. Mark Twain wrote that he thought she was the most amazing person to ever live in history after Jesus. And he said, nobody has ever led an army at the age of 16, 17, even Alexander the Great. So, and Vita Sackville West, another gay person, has written a great book on Joan of Arc.
yes, Vita.
That you might like, yeah.
Yeah, that's all I have. Just a bunch of gay saint comments. If someone else has a question, I'm done. This was great, Father Bill.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Okay.
I see Pat too. I can only see
Yeah,
Krista, Catherine, and Pat. That's the only people I can see. So how are you, Pat?
Pat's a great person to call on.
I have no questions, but I do want to thank you. This has been just completely wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Good. Yeah, I'm glad. Things go on, you know. I mean, I happen to know Andrew Harvey, who's a writer, and he just asked me to do a blurb. I've never been asked to do a blurb before on a book on Hadovich of Brabant, who is a woman mystic. And it took me a whole day to write it. And what I ended up saying was, I don't think you can overestimate the time that we're living in right now, overestimate the gravity of it and the scariness of it. And yet the hopes and the miraculous things going on, the shining people that are coming up, you know, even in this time. And that's why I would push again Melissa Raphael's book, The Feminine Face of God at Auschwitz. I think it's just an extraordinary book and really gives you hope. I mean, if you can have hope, writing that book, then you can have hope doing anything, you know. So I think that sounds like the bell is tolling, right?
Sounds like the bell is tolling.
I guess I just have one question too.
Sure, Don, go ahead.
I was just thinking of what happened, what became of Father Lentz, your teacher of the iconography.
Oh, that's Don, right?
That's
Yeah.
Don. Yep.
Robert Lentz is a Franciscan friar. He's not a priest, he's a brother. And he lives in St. Bonaventure, New York. And he's still painting. Robert is a formidable figure, I'll tell you. You know, I always used to say I was like the sorcerer's apprentice. I was Mickey Mouse and he was, you know, the sorcerer. And he's only 2 years older than me, but he's such an extraordinary being. I mean, he's a perfectionist and he actually achieves that perfection in his work. And he's still painting. His birthday was October 9th, and I think he's 2 years older than me. So he's probably 74, 75 now. So I think he's still going strong.
And do you get together ever with him? And
no, you know, I haven't left New Mexico since I was given a gift to go on a pilgrimage to Israel last March. And I arrived back in New York March 8th. And, you know, it's the 13th, they shut everything down. And on the 9th, I flew home and I haven't gone anywhere since March 9th, whatever that was, 2020. So I'm pretty much okay with not going anyplace, you know. I mean, it's not hard for me. And New Mexico is so open. That's the other thing. It's not like living in an apartment in New York where it's tight, you know. The weather is possible here 90% of the year. You know, you could almost sit outside most of the time. It's not Arizona, but it's definitely warmer than Boston or New York or someplace. So yeah, you can look up Robert on, you can Google him, Lentz, Robert Lentz, and he's got lots of work that he's done lately.
Thank you, Father. I want
thank you.
to be mindful of your time, of course. I'm really grateful for you taking the time to chat with us, and we so appreciated learning more about your work through the documentary. Maybe we can do like a Zoom class applause.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great. Very interesting, you know, to do Zoom for me. I keep leaning forward, like, you know, it's going to make a difference. Like I can talk through the phone or something. Anyway, thank you. And everybody have a good night.
Thank you.
And God bless you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.